Well, folks, they say that all good things must come to an end, and this episode is going to mark the end of the first run of growing some Louisiana history for me, mostly because of the fact I'm pretty much ran out of crops to talk about so far. But it won't be the end of the complete series, but it will be a pause for now and give me a chance to find some more things to grow and plant. But the one I got today goes way back even before we were a state or a country. If you've been following along, you probably have an idea. And it's got a little bit of sweet history, just like sugarcane, but also similar to the groundnut. So can you figure out what it is? Well, stay tuned and find out. Hey folks, welcome back to the latest episode of Growing Some Louisiana History with me, David Hubbell. And this is actually going to be probably the last episode from the spring of 2023, because I'm all out of crops. Well, I'm all out of plants that are tied to Louisiana originally. This one I've been growing actually for a number of years and really did not realize the connection between it and LSU. But I'm talking about in particular the Beauregard sweet potato. Anybody who is familiar with some of our Civil War history would know that General Beauregard, a figure out of the Civil War era and from Louisiana. So even though I was associating the name somewhat with him, I didn't realize that there was a direct tie where someone actually kind of named it in his honor. Anyway, I've been growing this for a number of years, and when I started this series, I was looking through my seeds and plants I was growing to try to figure out what kind of ones had connections to Louisiana history, and lo and behold, this sweet potato came up. Now, sweet potatoes, as I have mentioned from time to time, have actually been a major cash crop in South Louisiana for almost 100 years now. Native Americans have been eating sweet potato for centuries in this country. Anyway, Columbus noted that the Indians of the West Indies had been eating them on his initial voyages back in the late 1400s. And he actually brought them subsequently with him to Europe in the early 1500s. Hernando de Soto is also noted as finding the Native Americans in South Louisiana eating them on his visits through there in the early 1500s. So as part of a Louisiana diet and the original Louisianians, sweet potatoes have been there for as long as they have, probably. So anyway, I started looking into it and found out that really they commercially started growing the sweet potatoes probably right shortly before World War I, but then right after World War I it really is. The initial commercial venture was in Sunset, Louisiana around 1910. It didn't become a commercial crop for Louisiana until really after World War I. And that's around the time LSU really started getting into researching and developing them. Julian C. Miller, who we talked about earlier on some of the tomato development episodes, was really a spearhead there and developed several different varieties with different names. But the one that was really popular from 1930 till the late 50s was something called the Puerto Rico, or it's like Unit 1 Puerto Rico. But that one was like it had low yields, but it was very sweet. And I think it was kind of more stubby. Some people still grow it today, but what they found is like it's really sweet and it was really good, and you could just heat it or cook it in the oven and eat it as is without any additional butter or sugar. But once again, it was very low yields, and Louisiana was the largest producer of sweet potatoes in the country until around 1976, when I believe North Carolina took over that prominence. In 1937, there was in order to kind of distinguish the sweet potatoes that were grown on the East Coast to those grown in South Louisiana, they came up with calling them Yams. Even though anybody who studies horticulture and plants would realize that a true yam from Africa is totally different than what we're calling yams. So when you buy a yam in the stores in the United States, it's really more of a marketing term, again, like you've probably heard from some of the other terms that we've used on some of these Louisiana seeds to distinguish it from some of the other products. So around 1960, because of the low yields, they went to another type of popular sweet potato that was grown, and that was the Centennial, and it was also put together by Dr. Julian C. Miller's team. The other aspects that Dr. Miller was involved with was the creation of the The LSU Ag Center Sweet Potato Research Station in Chase, Louisiana was developed in 1948. It's still used today for potato development. Well, the sweet potatoes, like I said, 1976, Louisiana lost its first place distinction as the sweet potato producer in the United States to North Carolina. And part of it was mostly due to a lot of the low yields. And what ended up happening is around 1982 to 1985, they started working on another sweet potato that might take over and replace these other two, that the Puerto Rican and the Centennials, that were really kind of still being both grown, but the Centennial was probably a little more prominent at that time. And that is when LSU entomologist L.H. Ralston came up with what he termed the Beauregard sweet potato in honor of General Beauregard. This sweet potato could grow well in the hard pan soil and also in the sandy soil, where it would actually kind of become more elongated. Produced around 1985, and it instantly almost replaced the Puerto Rican and the Centennial and the sweet potato crops. Now, from what I read about, most of the sweet potatoes that are grown, about 75% go into canning and 25% are sold fresh. So the Beauregard, I mean, instead of doing a whole lot of trials, they could just see instant success with it. And I think what I've read is that they just immediately kind of released it for people to start growing, and overnight it took over. And obviously even today it is still popular, especially in home gardens. That seems to be like the only sweet potato slips I'm seeing around Mobile. Now, it is noted that it is resistant to some of the insects that have been plagued other sweet potato varieties, such as the white grub, which actually kind of feeds on the roots. It can still be susceptible to root knot nematodes. And also, what you'll see on the skin is kind of described as being sensitive, so some feathering, but when you take it and you cure it, actually those blemishes kind of go away. Now, curing is a process where once you dig it out of the ground, they put it like in a kiln for like 2 weeks and let it dry out, and I think that allows these sugars to intensify in there, as well as preserve it, if you will. As it goes through that drying process, it can actually stay in the kiln for a while, and that's why you see sweet potatoes available pretty much all throughout the year due to that curing process. Now, the other aspect of the kiln process is it allows the natural chemical changes to occur, which allow them to soften up and be sweet. So if you pick your sweet potatoes out of the garden, I mean, I don't have a kiln, but I typically just have kind of set them out and let them dry in a cool spot for a while before I even try to use them. With these sweet potatoes, you'll notice that the skin is kind of different than what you'll see on a regular Irish potato or a golden Yukon. They're obviously a lot tougher skin because it's basically just a bigger root that just kind of grows and gets bigger as it's in the ground. But when you cut into them, there'll be a nice orange color, and especially when you bake them, they get even darker orange. And that's due to the beta carotene that's found in there because of the vitamin A in it. But it is also listed in the top 4 foods as a cancer fighter. So that's something to know, and that may be something, if you haven't grown sweet potatoes before and you're interested in those health benefits, you may want to go in to give a good portion of your yard or your garden to that. Now, Louisiana sweet potatoes are planted anywhere from April 1st through about June 15th, and it's about 140 days to maturity. So you'll start seeing them being picked all the way from August through mid-November. And all you have to do really is you get a spade and you kind of loosen the soil, because you don't, I've made the mistake a lot of times where you take the shovel and you go too deeply and you cut your sweet potato in half, and that kind of makes it difficult for the curing process. So you just really need to kind of crack that soil and just lift it. So my sweet potato bed out there is not really all that big. I just kind of grow them, get a few every year, but really it's not that much to really do a whole lot with. For Thanksgiving, we'll end up buying sweet potatoes to bake, to make the sweet potato casserole. But I like to take them and put it in a recipe that John Foles has called far dressing, or sweet far dressing, which all that is it's a combination of ground pork, ground beef, and chicken livers or gizzards that you poach. You grind in there with it, cook it down with mostly the Trinity, and then you kind of put the sweet potatoes in it, and they'll disappear because you grate them and they just kind of dissolve, but they add a sweetness to it and consistency. It's a real popular dish in the river parishes where my family came from. Now, potatoes aren't necessary to make that dish, but it's a nice added bonus to it. Gives it a little bit of sweetness, like I said. So we'll go out in the garden and we'll see what mine are doing. Once again, just to warn you, it's going to be a little disappointing because I really only have about a 4x4 area, and it's really pretty much overgrown, and the gagutsa's on top of it. So, but you'll get to see what the leaves look like and how it runs. And I've got some pictures from past plantings, and you'll get to see what the Beauregard looks like when it's grown in a home garden. So let's go check it out. Well, there's really not a lot to look at here in the garden. Unfortunately, I planted these in the same spot that I usually plant my potatoes, my new potatoes, or my golden potatoes, whatever you want to call it. But this is the leaf of the Beauregard sweet potato. It's a really pretty nice leaf. I really am not doing this probably the justice it deserves, because I kind of throw it in this spot here. You can see it's got a lot of vines growing, and I really need to do a better job of probably covering those and allowing them to produce the sweet potato. Like I said, I probably put these in. I found this at one of the big box stores for the last several decades, or last decade or so. And I've only seen the one variety, Beauregard. And I really didn't realize it had the Louisiana connection. But what you'll see is that I've unfortunately kind of let it grow amongst the gagutsa. So it actually, if you don't put it in the ground, it can actually start to climb. And if it climbs, it's not producing sweet potatoes. Well, it's not producing as many. The sweet potatoes are going to be down there. Probably haven't really tried to check for any, but I've got some past pictures of ones. But it's, I guess you'd call it kind of a heart-shaped leaf, pointy. I'd really probably need to put a lot more of the fertilizers needed for root growth. I think some of the historical articles I was reading talked about some of them, I guess maybe right after World War I or the Great Depression, they really weren't able to fertilize them a lot. So my yields aren't really high. I would really like to do a lot better, but I know South Alabama, we do have some sweet potato history as well. So I would like to try with Puerto Rico and some of the others, even though I understand that they are maybe not as high yield, but it would just be interesting to kind of compare them and see. So anyway, like I said, this will give you a good idea what the leaves look like, and I'll show you some pictures of ones I've dug up in the past. I've gotten some pretty decent sized ones out of this bed. For the most part, as we talked about with the sandy soil, these tend to get, I don't know, about 10 inches long, and in this garden they don't seem to thicken up as much, although I've had a few that I left longer and ended up with much thicker. So what I'll probably do, since it is September now, is I'll just wait till November and pick mine and just go from there. So I'll probably post some pictures on Facebook about that. So anyway, hopefully this will help give you an idea of kind of what the sweet potato leaf looks like, or the Beauregard leaf. Well, thanks again, folks, for tuning in. Hopefully this information on the Beauregard sweet potato has been informative to you, as well as a little history of sweet potatoes in South Louisiana. It's really a crop going way back, not just 100 years, but predates a lot of the European settlers coming to the country. And it's been a staple, and obviously many people enjoy it on their Thanksgiving table, but it's also good to eat throughout the year. It's a good source of vitamin A, as we already talked about, and it's a good cancer fighter. I really need to eat more sweet potatoes in my diet, and like I said, if you can get some good ones from South Louisiana in the form of the Beauregard, or maybe even get some of those older versions like Puerto Rican to try for yourself. It sounds like a fun type of plant to continue to grow. As I mentioned, this is going to be the last in this series. I think I got 16 or 17 total, from anything from our tomatoes, eggplants, sugarcane, Just have to go back and watch it. But it's been fun. It's definitely helped me improve my knowledge on the history of these different varieties of plants. And it even gives me an opportunity. Obviously, I will grow some more of these next year. But I'm going to also try to look for new ones that I hadn't grown. I know I got a bunch of beans from John Kuykendall that I purchased earlier this year, so I'll be trying those next year. So we'll talk about that. I got a couple other tomato varieties that I have in mind. And we'll see. Like I said, it won't be season 2 or anything like that. It'll just be added to this whole series of growing some Louisiana history. But I hope this information has been helpful to you, and I'd like to hear from you if you're growing anything, or if you have a suggestion of an old Louisiana crop I should try to grow in my garden here in Mobile. Once again, thank you for everybody who's also subscribed to the David J. Hubbell YouTube channel. If you haven't done so, I'd appreciate it. That way you'll be alerted when I kick future episodes of this off again. Like I said, I'm going to try to do some more cooking episodes, and then probably going to start getting back into melon season. It's been tough with all the heat we've had in the summer of 2023. So I'm going to probably document how those things are going, just to kind of give people an idea how they're coming back. But anyway, butterflies. But anyway, appreciate everybody who's tuned in, and the feedback I've gotten has been helpful. Like I said, I really would like to learn some other crops that you may have grown or your family grew that I should be trying out, because I'm always interested in learning about our history through the food and the recipes, and I want to keep that alive for not just me, but my kids, and hopefully my grandkids, and nieces and nephews, and all family members, and your kids and grandkids, and your nieces and nephews, and all. So thanks again. It's been fun, and I will see you in a future episode of something, but I'll see you again soon. Thanks.